webinar. I don't think we've stretched as far as the other side of the world, so that's making me happy, David. So welcome along. So lovely to be here this afternoon talking about appraisals and my smarter, which I'm going to keep you in suspense about the ER as we go through. Like many areas of HR, I was thinking when I was putting this appraisal together, I always say quite often at the beginning of webinars, oh, this is a part of HR I do love. And again, appraisals is a part of that I do love. I'll have to do one in disciplinaries because that's one I don't love. But the appraisal meeting and the appraisal systems are an absolute fundamental part of your feedback strategy to your employees. But it's another one of those management tools that we often have lots of assumptions when we move people into management that they can do an appraisal and they can give feedback. Now, I'm not going to go a lot into the given feedback because that is a separate webinar and we're on a bit of a time scale here, but feedback is an absolutely critical part of an appraisal. And the appraisal has, lots of value and reasons why we do it. The fundamental thing is a communication tool and a feedback tool. It gives focus to the objectives that you're setting people. It helps look at training plans, and it's usually looking at a period before and leading up to the appraisal, and then a very big focus on going forward. The big thing in an appraisal for me is going forward. Appraisals shouldn't be a surprise. The things that you talk in there about reviewing performance shouldn't just be left to, for example, an annual appraisal. But the appraisal meeting is very much a forward-looking. There might be issues, there might be very good performance to discuss there, and it's how you're going to manage that moving forward. So I do want that focus on appraisals to be forward-looking and what it wants to be. So before we get started, some of you will know me because I see some familiar faces on there, but also quite a few new ones. I am a HR professional, fully qualified member of the CIPD and also a qualified NLP practitioner. I've been running Red Elephant HR as a consultancy for about 6 years now and previously held some senior management positions in various sectors, all within HR. I'm also a trainer. I have a company called the Business Springboard that I'm delivering under today, and we focus there about specific leadership management development, but one thing we do are very strong on and core to our business is that we're practitioners as well as trainers. So I have a core business of an HR practitioner and I train on that. So everything that I deliver is relevant and actually day-to-day business. Okay, and as per normal, the copyright for the slides is the Business Springboard, and any advice given isn't designed solely for any particular problems that you have. Okay, so let's get into the actual webinar. So what I'm going to look at today, in there about half an hour, we will have time for questions at the end, so I've specifically left some time at the end for questions. But as Liz says, as we go through, please do interact on the chat board. If there's anything going along that's relevant, you ask a question, then I'll answer it as we go. But if not, there is a time at the end for some questions. So please do chat, communicate. It's good to know that you're all still out there, and talk to me on the board. That would be really appreciated. So what I want to talk about today, this is quite a practical session about the appraisal. So I want to get back to the basics really of how we should conduct the actual meeting. So we're going to talk a bit about the planning and prep for that appraisal meeting. I'm going to mention consistency because this is something as managers we have to really keep in check. Not only do you want consistent performers, but you have to be a consistent performer as a manager. And it's very important that we're people at the end of the day, and we will have personal views that come into play, and we like what we are like, but we don't want a team full of mini-me's because that won't get us anywhere. We'll have no diversity, and we'll have no extra thoughts and ideas that come from other sources. So consistency is a really big thing in any sort of management, but particularly in an appraisal. I want to talk about tackling performance problems, but also praising the job well done, and this is something I do bang on an awful lot about. We see an awful lot of courses advertised for managing poor performance, but how many courses do you see for managing overperformers? We just we like them, but we don't do anything about them, and we leave them over there. And we're not going to manage them effectively. But that is a massive skill in itself. And really, those are the people that we really want in our team, and we want to maximise this, not only for their own performance and keep them motivated and keep them achieving, but use them as examples to other people in the team as well. I'm going to talk a bit about communications and how we do that, and then we'll get onto these smarter objectives towards the end. Okay, good place to start is what we need to do before, and that's where, as a manager, we have to put in a lot of our review time. Now, I do notice on the delegate list there's an awful lot of HR people on here, which is great and welcome, but if any of this you feel is appropriate for your teams, then you can download the webinar afterwards and get them to watch it, because this is a really focus on doing things, and there may be some pointers in there that you want to share with the managers who do appraisals. It may be that you're sat with managers as HR people doing the appraisals, and I often quite get asked to do that, to give support to them. And that's why I say it's one of those things that we just kind of presume managers can do, but quite a lot of my work will be supporting managers who've been established managers for a while but find giving feedback and structuring themselves quite difficult. So it's something people need support on. So if you are in a company that you have other performance reviews, and this is a system that you're getting into, then I would check back through last performance reviews. I've got a really big bugbear on appraisal documents, and some people see it as a box ticking exercise, and there's a form of send to HR to keep them people happy in that office. That's more than that to keep us happy, believe you me. But this shouldn't just disappear into a drawer. They should be working documents. Now, however you structure your appraisal document, what I would tend to like to see in those documents are a review of the past and a plan for going forward, a competence review for things that are important across the whole of your business, which might have things like communication, time management, customer service, etc., depending on what your business is. And then some competencies that are specific to that job. For example, if it was a salesperson, it might be actual sales skills, conversion skills, etc. Or if it was somebody working in a factory making widgets, it might be efficiency, it might be time. So what is ever specific for that role? And then when I say about the going forward bit, I'm thinking to the appraisal forms I've put in place, it might be even a 10-page document. I'm going to come back to paper exercise, and I don't want it to be a paper exercise. But in that 10-page document, there might only kind of be 2 pages on the past and the rest going forward. So we want this big focus on appraisal about how we're going to support anything interventions we need to put in place and how we're going to move forward. So other things I'd quite like to see in there are objective setting, training plans, ideas for the future. Now, I don't want these to disappear into a drawer. Definitely objectives and training plans should be stuck on people's desks, soft copies up there on the desktop, wherever that may be, so that you as managers and also the people can be working towards them. If they disappear into a drawer and we pull them out in 12 months' time and say, oh, did we do this last January? No, we never quite got round to that. They need to be a working document. It's not a paper exercise. The other things we need to do as managers, gather evidence. Now, very big on giving feedback is about being information specific. It's far easier to deliver a message being information specific, but also it's far easier to understand and accept a message if it's information specific. An example, your lateness is getting out of control. A response can be immediate defence. No, it's not. I was early yesterday. They're not thinking of that. Or, a person sat next to me, they've been late. What have she said to her? So if we're information specific and say, okay, I've got, clocking in or things that I've noticed over the last week, and I see that on Tuesday the 25th that you came in at 9:05, on Thursday the 27th you came in at 9:10. That's not acceptable. It's very information specific, and it focuses the individual on looking at. Otherwise, for good things, you're doing a really good job. How am I doing a really good job? Where's your evidence? Is that targets? Is it quantitative? Is it qualitative? Is it customer feedback? Has anybody else sent information to you? And that's where things like the the pay complement might come into play, where you've got a tool to get some feedback from other people and customers, etc., to give that information back to people. Another thing to do before is block out enough time in your diary. And this is the bit that's really key because we're all busy and managing time's exceptionally hard. There's never enough hours in the day. We live in an instant gratification environment where when an email comes through, we've got to reply to it immediately. We need to put that to the side and give people a focus. This is their time. You need to give them that focus that you are there and you're there for them. So how much is enough time? Well, I can't tell you really. It depends how far the discussion will go. It depends what your structure for appraisals is, and it depends how you're going to follow that. But you need to take these into consideration and block it out. I once had a manager and said, right, yeah, come in, we're going to do 2 appraisals. I've put aside an hour, that'll be fine, won't it? I'm like, half an hour appraisal? Perhaps not. You're not investing an awful lot, especially if this is your annual review for your employees. You can get value out of it, so give it that time. It also can be a bit draining because you sat there and you're focusing and you want to get this information across. So if you sat doing them all day, you need to give each one adequate focus. So I sometimes say, well, fitting in with your diaries, put one in the morning, one in the afternoon. It gives the manager time to do other stuff around them, and it leaves enough time for them to get on with it. But that's something that's got to be a personal judgment in there. I would also plan what you're going to say. A good appraisal form should lead you through the meeting and allow for that planning. So there may be something that the employees had to fill in first about how they feel that they've done. You need time to reflect on that and come up with a response to how to give your point of view. So there's a lot of thinking before. So in management time, that also means you've got to allocate time in diaries and in busy work schedules to do the prep before an appraisal. At the meeting, some key, very basic things. How do you sit? And it depends on the culture of your organisation. It depends on what you want to achieve. I'm not a fan of sitting either side of a desk because that's a big barrier, and we want to build rapport. We want people to feel comfortable to be able to talk and communicate and get the right response out of it. I don't know if we've got any Office fans on the webinar, but there's some great clips from The Office where David I can't remember his name now, but he's doing some appraisals. So if you ever get a chance, Google that YouTube. There's some really good examples on there about the appraisal and about the basic things. So think about how you want to sit, because that's your form of communication about putting people at ease and getting the best result. Think about interruptions. Is there a quiet place? The phone's diverted, or you've been asked not to be broken, that your mobile phone is put away. You need to have the focus on the individual and have enough time to do that. Other things to think about at the actual meeting is when you're going to complete the dreaded appraisal forms. Are you going to do it as you go along? Is it something you're going to reflect on? Is it stuff to be completed before? And all this will depend on your appraisal system. Now, I think there is a place, definitely, to make notes and to fill in something there and then. You don't want to walk away from the meeting with one impression and the appraisee has a different impression, and when the forms are completed, they're not a true reflection of what the meeting was, or you don't agree. So be very careful about when you're filling things in the meeting and how it's agreed and what objectives you set, and there's also got to be a record of it. As I said before, information and evidence is great. Print that out, bring it in, an email from a customer, an email from another department, a customer complaint, sales figures, whatever that may be, have it there, the evidence with you. It's far better than relying on memory or trying to tackle an issue without anything in there to back it up. I've said there as well, who will talk? Because, you've got to think about that balance of who is having a discussion, and you want the other person to engage and interact, but also you don't want to take over, because there's a key thing in there about listening and what balance and who will do the talking. You need to be prepped to get your points across, but they should have an opportunity as well to put their points across, engage, agree, and develop a plan. Okay. Now, I have mentioned consistency being a key thing. Ultimately, we do want consistent performance in our teams. And when we're looking at managing performance, we want that more consistent line. We also want consistency in one individual's performance and not an up and down. And something that quite often gets brought up is when you're delivering an appraisal, should salary and benefits and reward play a part in that? And there's a lot of debate in the management world about how this should be. Um, my view of keeping consistency is if you split these two things over a period of time, because it's human nature, it's like build up to Christmas, kids' behaviour really gets better. It's meant to. I've never quite ticked that off of mine. But, the behaviour increases because there's something coming away and then it drops afterwards. And it can be the same with appraisals, subconsciously, that you might see an increase in performance when they know it's going to be reviewed. So there could be an argument to have a split so you get more consistency in behaviour across a year. For example, you have a peer review in January and an appraisal in July, for example. The other thing I find that it's about setting expectations, and if your employees think that pay is going to be talked about within the appraisal and you might have it up your sleeve to talk about at the end, then the focus isn't on the appraisal, and in the mind and subconsciously they're thinking, right, what about money, what about money? So the emphasis is taken away from the actual appraisal and it's more into the financial discussion that's going to be at the end. So I quite like setting an expectation. I'm not going to talk about your salary during the appraisal, but it is something that we'll go back to. Another really key thing is that if you are reviewing salary, I am a very big fan of rewarding good behaviour. So you may have a salary increase that ties into performance. So people say, well, if I'm not going to talk about salary at the appraisal, when do I do it? Because I want to give them feedback on the performance to get that. That's all very well and good, and you will have your documents there as evidence and review against the objectives that you're setting to use as a pay issue. But just remember in there, we don't want the focus being away from the appraisal and the behaviour. We want to keep money away from that. Okay, so we've put a quick poll up there. Do you discuss salary and appraisals currently? So if you all want to engage with that, I'd really appreciate some feedback of how that does happen. So yeah, at the minute we've got a lot more people that don't and more people engaged there. I'm really pleased to see that. I really am. And if you want to use a chat box to say any of the reasons why key reasons why you do or don't, I'd be interested to see them in there. But yeah, I am. I'm very pleased to see that you do separate the two things out. Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, so talking about consistency of the manager's performance in delivering an appraisal, I think you've got to think of benchmarks, and it does get harder if you're appraising people that aren't in qualitative measured roles. So for example, if it's sales and you've got a clear target and you say you've got to sell 20 widgets a day, and you've got a very clear numerical gauge and benchmark in that. Likewise, if it's in a factory and they've got to make so many widgets a day. What happens when it's a customer service or it's a shop? Or what is your definitions? What is your benchmarks for good, medium, not so good, poor? And you need to have that very clear in your head. Now, I haven't got a massive problem because we're all individuals, and I deal with lots of managers who will have different approaches to these and different measures of what's good, bad, and indifferent. And that isn't a problem if you yourself follow your own rules. It would be a problem if two people were managing the same team and one person did half the appraisals and the other person did the other half and the benchmarks weren't aligned. That's when you would get your problem starting. But if you're managing your whole team and you're consistent in your measures of performance, then I haven't got a problem at all with that. And I have some managers who will, I wanted to say tolerate that, but I don't think tolerate's the right word. I think accept a different level or want to be, cup half full people. And yet there's a big issue for, and a big case for motivation, which this is all about. But just as long as there is consistency in your own benchmarks. The other thing I said there is put personal judgments to one side, because I mentioned diversity at the beginning, and I have before interviewed some internal salespeople and come out of an interview and thought, I can't stand that person. They're really not my cup of tea, but I've recruited them because I know they'll be fantastic at the jobs. We're all individuals. this is not a friendship race. It's not about building a team of mini-me's and people who we like. It's about building a team and giving recognition for performance that brings value and is what we're looking for. So I said, think about personal judgments there and put them to one side. From an HR legal perspective, this is the key part that obviously would lead us back to the importance of proposals, about doing that and being fair and consistent, and being honest. A big thing in tribunals is when people are dismissed for poor performance. One of the first things a tribunal would look for past evidence. And I was at a tribunal myself last year where there was performance issues with a lady, and she'd been dismissed due to her performance. And she was a very strong character, and I think her manager found her very difficult to manage. So in the appraisal, she went very softly and didn't directly address these issues. So our appraisals were all said satisfactory. So we sat in a tribunal, and we were trying to say this lady didn't perform well. And the tribunal's looking at the appraisals going, but hang on, this you all says she's satisfactory. What are you talking about? So we've got to be very careful about our benchmarks and to be honest in appraisal as well. So from a legal point of view, it will be used an awful lot. I've said those measures which kind of ties into your benchmarks as well. What are your measures going to be? What's important to you as a company as a whole and for that role? So I mentioned core competencies for a company. And there will be things, if you think of your company values, that might not be specific to that role, but as an overall company value. And you need to be very careful about think in advance about what your measures of performance are. What is it you want to look at and what you want to target? Okay. So looking back about performance issues, now this is where I say this course is everywhere about performance issues and how to address them. So one thing I will say is that a key thing about an appraisal or about any performance management is about restoring performance to acceptable levels. That should be your ultimate aim. Now, I have to admit, there's always casualties. Not everybody will get to your acceptable level, but that should be your first goal. And that's how the law is structured, and that's mounds and mounds of history and work and studies in the world of management all lead to. Good practice is about restoring performance to acceptable levels. So if somebody's going the wrong way, we want to turn them around and get them back to where they need to be. There should also in an appraisal be no surprises. If you do them annually, and that's another point about how often you do them as well, my advice on that from my experience is I'm quite comfortable with annual appraisals, as long as that's backed up with some other measures throughout the year, because there shouldn't be surprises. So if there's a reason to give good feedback or negative feedback, that should be done as close to the time as possible to have the maximum effect and recorded somewhere and drawn upon at the appraisal. There should be no surprise in there, which is why I'm very big that the appraisal isn't just about looking forward. The biggest emphasis is looking backwards. The biggest emphasis is looking forward. So I'm quite comfortable with annual appraisals. There might be a time if somebody's gone through particularly training or a new job role or a probationary period that we put an interim one in there about 6 months. But I wouldn't say there's a value in doing a full appraisal more frequently than 6 months. There's a big value in doing one-to-ones and supervision sessions in the interim to that though. Okay. I said it there, information. Big thing, again, it comes back to feedback. It's far easier to give and far easier to receive if you have the information. We don't want that initial thing to come up as defence. We want people to accept the feedback and make a change to it. So if we remove barriers from that, it's going to make our job easier. Feedback isn't just about criticism. But there is a place for criticism. So when you can tie this in with the feedback, so I'll go back to my lateness. So you were late on Wednesday, Thursday, blah, blah, blah. You get the information, you've got it there to address it. Say, that disappoints me. We've had this discussion before. Or, it's made your colleagues' jobs harder because they've had to cover for you. There's a place for criticism as long as it comes after the specific feedback. But don't be worried about giving that too. Direct, I can't stress this enough of my example in the tribunal. We've got to give some direct. There's no point in dressing it up. There was I think the management way to do it was the sandwich that we've all come across in the past of bad, good, bad. And that was quite well publicised and widely accepted as a management tool, I'm not that really fussed on it, to tell you the truth, because we've got to be direct. We don't dress things up. The ultimate aim is to get the right message across and to restore behaviour to where it needs to be. So why dress it up? You want the message and you want that to get across. And also think about your language that you use and your non-verbal communication, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in communication, but that's something you've got to be quite key on. Okay, so then the good performance in praise and performance, again, think about the full feedback and not praise alone. So like, as well as thinking not criticism alone, we'll have to think about not praise alone. Just say, oh, Joanne, you've done a great job. That's all very nice, and I might feel all lovely and warm and fluffy, but I don't know what I've done to do a good job, so how can I repeat it? And I might be a bit confused, or I might come away with the wrong image of, oh, she actually thought I did that very well, but actually you thought I'd done something else very well. So again, information, information, information. Have your evidence. Show people what they're doing well and praise them for it. And again, so if you come up with the facts in it, so the report you wrote last week was absolutely brilliant. You had all the information I needed in there. It was completed on time and it went to the right people. That was amazing. Thank you, Joanne. You made me really happy. So it's got the information in and it's got some praise afterwards as well. But the biggest thing is don't neglect, and again, this can be easy. We leave good performance. I did an appraisal with one manager, and she said, I've got a couple of people to appraise. This lady's going to be dead easy because she's good, and I tell her she's good every day, so it's going to be really quick and simple. And that appraisal, the lady was so overwhelmed to get some formal feedback in a meeting with information specific that afterwards she came to me and said that means so much to me to get that feedback, and she was really fired up and motivated. But the manager thought, she doesn't need to hear it. Well, they do need to hear it. Let's not neglect the praise and performance because it's what we want to see. The other thing I want to note on there is praise where praise due. We quite forget sometimes that what we're looking for, acceptable is fine. That's what we want to achieve. So I'll put this into probably an easy one of, sales. If we say sell 20 widgets a day and some 3 people sell 20 and one sells 25, the 3 people for 20 also need that feedback because that's exceptional. That's acceptable. That's what we want. It's not bad because then, or even if one person just sells 20 and 3 people are selling 25, we've still said 20 is acceptable. It may make you look back and address your measures and your benchmarks in the future, but it's about acceptable performance. I think, we've come as a society to seem acceptable as a negative term, but it's not. It's what we're looking for. So you need to think about your measures, and I do cover this when I talk about managing performance in a separate workshop that I do run. And then how will you deal with this exceptional performance? Because you want more of it. So really think what you're going to do, what do you want out of it, how you're going to mirror it with other people, and how you're going to keep it going. Okay, so I just wanted to briefly on communication, something that's absolutely key in appraisals. Obviously, there's a whole range of communication tools out there, verbal and non-verbal. Think about the whole message that you're sending over. It's not just about the words that you're saying. It's everything that come in there. And I think also be aware that depending on any study that you look at, is around 25 to 50% of what we hear is retained. So that means that if you talk to somebody for 10 minutes, they're only really going to hear about 2.5 to 5 minutes of the conversation. So bear that in mind, and that's why we need to use other communication tools. And you know yourself, if you stop and ask for directions, you won't hear it all. Or if you go home and you try to relay a conversation, we pick out bits because we've got our own personal filters in there. So think about the information that you're putting across. I said avoid these fat words. One of my bugbears is try. Can you try and achieve more? Can you try and do that? Can you try and be on time? Well, sorry, I tried. It's what you asked me to do, but I'm not here on time. So if we say these words or try or can you do it better, it's not specific enough. There's too much scope for misinterpretation. So we need to be, right, from next week, you must be here at 9 o'clock, rather than can you try to be on time? Because I've tried and I didn't reach what you wanted to, but all you asked me to do was try, so I've done as you asked. The other thing about active listening and pay attention, which comes back to your preparation before and looking at the environment, no distractions, giving the feedback. We know when people aren't listening, there's nothing more frustrating. And this is the employee's time. They want that, hour, 2 hours of your attention. And there's nothing wrong in asking for that. Big thing of checking for understanding, and that's a key bit of when you fill in the forms and when you write things down. That's absolutely key that you both come out with the same view of what's happened. I do run a video clip when I do feedback training about appraisals of an appraiser and an appraisee and their assumptions that they've come out with and how they've taken away. And it's so easy to happen that you're not coming out on the same page. So check so you know what you need to do. So from next week, you are here at 9 o'clock. Okay? Yep, we've put that as an objective. We're happy with it. Thanks. And remember, communication's all sorts, not just your verbal. Think about the written documents as well. No surprises and agreement. So finally, before we end, just looking at those smarter objectives. We've all heard of the SMART, and I'm not going to drill over them because I'm sure you've all done them, and they did the rounds in management behaviour a long time ago. But it's still very key, and it's something of setting objectives. The amazing amount of time I see objectives that they're not smart, and they don't follow them. So we want to be specific, measurable, achievable, etc., etc. The two others that I add on there, they need to be enjoyable or ethical. And absolutely key, they need to be recorded. Now, there's masses of research out there that show people will change behaviour and do things if it's more fun. If any of you get a time, do a Google search on the Fun Factory piano stairs, and you will see that that's an experiment that was done in another country where they wanted to encourage people to take the stairs rather than the escalator. So they made the stairs into a piano, and the results were astounding. So they changed behaviour by making it a bit more enjoyable. And enjoyable takes on many different forms. It depends on the people. It doesn't have to be reward. It doesn't have to be all singing and dancing. It can be things like pride and recognition, ethical, where people know you're doing things right. They can have a really big difference as well. So think about these things that you can do to set your objectives, and just think a bit further on them. And then recorded, they need to form some part of your appraisal documents, but that needs to be a working document. I want to see objectives from appraisal pinned on the side of somebody's desk on a notice board or in a desktop as a soft copy on their computer. They need to be there, and you need to go back and monitor them against the time that you sent it to. Okay, so that brings me towards the end to the webinar. I've really had a pleasure talking to you all. So any questions and answers, please use the board there. And we will, I'm happy to answer any questions that we've got. So Susan, similar, I've seen a model where the E was engaging and the R was rewarding. Yeah, very good. I'm sure people come up with lots of different ones. And that's very true. It's the same sort of thing, Susan. It's the same principle, engaging, ethical enjoyment. It's taken that next level, and it's just been that intelligent and thinking of how you're going to change behaviour. Remember that this is about restoring it to acceptable or really maximising good performance. And that's what it's about. That's how we know we get good performance from people if we have these things in. And the R in rewarding, reward doesn't need to be financial. There's a whole other ream of reward, and a lot of it can just be recognition and pride. And agree about connecting with your objectives. Brilliant. Okay, so just finishing off, as I said, I do at the Business Springboard. Please visit the website. We're just undergoing a review, but our new course schedule will be up there shortly. We do offer in-house training, and we do a couple of masterclasses around we have the Yorkshire schedule up at the moment, but we can do otherwise. Our training is very much about a practical. We keep our groups of trainees between 6 and 8. So it's very much about focusing and developing an action plan. So we'd love to see you in any of that. And thank you very much. I will now hand you back to Liz, but it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie Wan, and thank you everybody for listening today. Brilliant. A lot to take in, I think, there. I'm still sort of thinking about how I'm going to implement that in my business. Just to let you know, I will send you through the recording of this event, and please feel free to leave your feedback. It'd be fabulous to hear from you. And finally, please reserve your place if you're interested in, we've got 2 legal employment law type events coming up. Next week we've got Family Friendly Rights that covers a whole host of family friendly issues from a legal perspective that you might be interested in. And the following week we'll be looking at the legal considerations of recruitment. So thank you everybody. Really appreciate your support and your help with these webinars, and wish you a very good day. So thank you.
The leader has turned lecture off, and your lines have been unmuted.